JayEmm on Cars is sponsored by Car Vertical. With just a registration number, or even better, a VIN, Car Vertical will search over 20 European databases to find out whether any car you're looking at has a hidden past. They can see if a vehicle was used as a taxi, stolen, suffered fire damage, or involved in a crash, even when it wasn't written off, so could pass other checks. Car Vertical is now an essential tool in my car buying kit, putting all the information I need to know together in one easy-to-read report. Even better, if you follow the link in the description down below, you'll get 10% off. A big thank you to them for being today's sponsor. Hello everybody. If you're a petrol head with limited space on the driveway and you're looking for one car that does absolutely everything, it's very difficult to look beyond something like a BMW M3, an M5, an AMG C63, E63, or an Audi RS6. They are extremely capable, very fast cars, which also have a healthy dose of practicality to boot. So in reality, there's very little need to get anything more. But for those select customers who still want to have a car that can do it all and yet insist on spending a lot more money, there are a few choices out there. Up until very recently, I suppose the king of that market segment was the Ferrari GTC4Lusso. Yes, a very flawed car in some way, but undoubtedly one of the finest ways to take you and a couple of kids across the continent. However, the GTC4Lusso is no more, and it's not going to be replaced. Instead, Ferrari will be introducing their new 4x4. So, if you wanted to buy one of those, and you're trying to think out what to get instead, should you buy one of these? This is a Porsche Panamera Turbo S e-hybrid Sport Turismo. Is it just me, or are all car names getting a little bit longer? You see, one of the cars which I'm going to be drawing comparisons with is the Mercedes-Benz AMG GT63S 4-door coupe 4MATIC Plus. And also the aforementioned GTC4Lusso and its predecessor, the Ferrari FF. Now, strictly speaking, that's a slightly unfair comparison. However, if you've got this kind of budget, an FF will certainly be accessible for you. As a petrolhead who's now made talking about cars their profession, there are still a few odd gaps here and there in my car driving history. Much as there are a few film buffs I know have still yet to get round to watching The Godfather, until very recently I had not driven a Panamera. I am, by the way, not drawing comparisons whatsoever with the Panamera and The Godfather, because one of those was a classic from the moment it was released, the other not so much. The original Panamera I actually considered buying in place of my recently acquired Maserati Quattroporte. The original Panamera, though, has looks only its mother, I think, could love. That apparently is due to the fact that Porsche's boss of the time, Wendelin Wiedeking, insisted on being able to sit in the back, and he's a rather tall fellow. So that meant it was very spacious, but also gopping to look at. However, when the second generation Panamera was introduced in 2017, it seemed to fix things quite a bit. They tried to go for this whole 911 looking rear end that to my eyes is just pointless in a car like this, but when they brought out the Sport Turismo variant, of which this is an example, I think Porsche at long last had on their hands a very good looking car. Here in this very tasteful shade of gentian blue with these great big 21-inch wheels on it, I think this is actually a bit of a stunner. And it packs a punch too. This facelifted version of the Turbo SE Hybrid now has a staggering 700 horsepower. 571 of which comes from a twin-turbo 4-litre V8 up front, and the remainder from a hybrid system, which has a reasonably large battery pack, about 18 kilowatts, and that means that this thing should perform pretty well. At a £142,000 base price, you'd really hope so, wouldn't you? And this being Porsche, there is an awful lot they are keen to not give you as standard. For example, the soft closed doors, not standard. These extremely comfortable 18-way adaptive memory seats, not standard. And even these upgraded ones are not ventilated. This very nice in the hand heated GT Sport steering wheel, not standard. This two-part panoramic roof up here, not standard. The lovely leather in here, which I think really does lift the cabin, not standard. The Sport Design Appearance package with gloss black accents, Also not standard, and bafflingly one of the most expensive options on this car at over 3,000 quid. That's followed closely by the £2,500 sports exhaust. All of this brings the total up to £160,000. That means it's a little bit more money than the AMG GT63S, which is about 135 grand plus options, but it's considerably cheaper than a GTC4Lusso. In fact, the last one of those that I drove was a Ferrari press car, and they're always very generously specified, and that was double the price of this. So the Ferrari really is the sort of benchmark, but I think if the Porsche falls a little bit short, that's not really much of an issue. So, first question, is it fast? Yes, it certainly is, but it delivers its speed in a very unusual way. You'd expect anything with 700 horsepower and about 850 newton meters of torque, it's over 600 pound-foot, to be able to give you the most ludicrous shove in the back at all times. And this sort of does that, but it never really gives you that authoritative punch that you expect. This may have something to do with the fact that if you chucked it on a set of scales, you'll find out it weighs just about 2.4 tons. It is in fact slightly heavier, or about the same, as the Taycan Turbo that I recently drove. Like that car, it has an awful lot of ways to help it get down the road quickly, including rear axle steer. That is standard. Very nice 8-speed PDK gearbox that works quite well. Great big Michelin Pilot Sport 4S tyres, and of course an all-wheel drive system to keep all of that power in check. Being a modern car, there are a lot of different ways you can configure the chassis and the engine and everything else. You've also got the added complexity of the hybrid drive system too, which has many different modes. I've currently got this in my individual settings. So that is chassis in normal, ride height at normal. If you want that low, you have to go to a sporty chassis setting. And the engine is in sport mode, where the motor is always on and it's using the hybrid system to enhance the performance. I've also got the exhaust in its noisier setting, but even so, it's not exactly thunderous. But that's okay. I think for a car like this, it should never be that loud. Apparently the old Panamera GTS was, and if somebody out there does have an old Panamera and they'd like to see it reviewed on the channel, please do get in touch. Engine response, actually, I'd say is pretty good, but this car delivers its power in a very unusual way. See, when you put your foot down at low RPM, you've got a little dial down here, like most hybrids, to show you whether it's charging or helping. And you can see very quickly that it gives you a lot of help. However, as the revs build, that help then bleeds away. And that leads you to think that, okay, after a certain point, the electric power is just not doing anything more. But if you keep your foot flat to the floor, and I mean absolutely welded, not halfway down, all the way down, once you then get back to about 5,000 RPM, the electric power comes back in again and gives you a sort of naturally aspirated kind of rush for that red line. I'd say the first 2 hours behind the wheel of this, I didn't realise there was extra power available. It's only when you put your foot all that way in that you get everything that she has. And that's something you could very, very easily miss, because most modern cars tend to try and give you just about everything straight away. And putting your foot down more doesn't really do much. So this is my 3-point turn hill start torture test. This car has 360-degree cameras, also not standard. It's got hill hold, and it's a very pleasant thing to move about. It is a big car. It's a fully paid up member of the 5 meter club, and it's not the easiest thing to place. I took it into a multi-story car park yesterday, and I was very grateful for the 360 cameras, because it was one of those with very, very high curbs and not a lot of space. Clearly designed for the Nissan Micra owner, not the Porsche Panamera customer. One of the things that really surprised me about this car, in a good way, was that despite the size of it, it's actually quite an agile thing. That rear axle steer definitely helps and means that you can turn this thing around in a much smaller space than you would expect. About the biggest problem I had with doing drive-bys and turning the car around was this B-pillar, because it's very large and in exactly the wrong place. So you have quite a large blind spot, and that's a frustration. In terms of getting you from A to B in a hurry, it's a very fine thing, but it's far from perfect. As you begin to really press on, you start to feel the car struggling to contain that fairly serious curb weight. Particularly on this little stretch of road, you've got a lot of bumps and crests and things like that, and you start to feel the whole thing starting to get out of shape. It is nowhere near as engaging to drive as the GTC4Lusso, and it's a far cry from the FF, which is easily one of my favourite driver's cars of all time. Seriously, not just a four-seater, it's absolutely brilliant, that thing. This is also way better than the AMG GT63, which simply just punished you for driving it anywhere because it was so unbelievably firm. Porsche of late seem to have been really excelling with ride quality in their cars. Now, the handling may not always be to my taste, and 911 in particular I've complained about a lot, but even that was an exceedingly comfy thing. And this is no different. It does have real gusto though. Sadly, the hybrid bit, as much as it helps the performance, doesn't seem to be doing much for fuel economy. Because when I picked this up yesterday, I drove it on the motorway for about an hour from Reading up to Silverstone. And in that time, the car scarcely averaged 22 to the gallon. In other bad news, there is also something this car shares with the AMG GT63. The spoiler's broken. Yep, brand new Porsche press car, and the spoiler is not working. I'm sure it's just a glitch in the software or something like that, but I have turned it off and on again a few times now and even left the car for a bit to try and get it to reset, but nope, that spoiler is permanently stuck up now. It's a shame really, because actually, generally speaking, this does feel like a really very well built car. Now, a lot of recent Porsche products that I've driven, I have bashed the interiors because, generally speaking, I'm not a fan. This does repeat some mistakes. You've got lots of touch buttons and things, but by and large, actually, I think it works for this kind of car. Not so keen on the whole invisible buttons type stuff down here. However, all of the key controls do still have a physical way of operating them. So for your temperature, fan speed, your volume, there are actual proper toggle switches or buttons. That I like. That I do really appreciate that. You've also got buttons here on the steering wheel. Confusingly, you only seem to have a button to go forward on the stereo rather than backwards. I don't know why they can't just put that in. Some of their cars, you have to program the hotkey to be the skip button, so what's going on there, I'm not so sure. I also don't like the fact that there doesn't appear to be an easy way to say stop navigation without going onto the big screen up here. Now, in fairness, there is a great big button here that just says stop when you're on the map, and that's reasonably self-explanatory, but I think there should be a way of operating it from over here too. If you're going to have all these screens on this side of the car, then you should make them do more things. Gearbox is really very nice. I like these paddles. They're not too big, but they're metal, and they feel good in the hand, and for this type of car, again, they suit it. One of the few things about the interior that does really bug me is this massive acreage of just nothing over there in front of the passenger. I felt like there would be an opportunity to put like a model name or something there. It just seems like sort of advertising space they've just left blank. If you do put this into one of its sporty modes, it doesn't really seem to improve the car's dynamics, just makes it a little bit firmer. The steering is okay, but not great. Brakes are very good. They are enormous carbon ceramic stoppers and work fairly well. The hybrid system's also very well integrated. The engine comes in smoothly, so for driving around town, it's actually quite a seamless thing. You have got a charge mode in here too. Take note, JLR. So this morning, I began the journey with only about 3 miles of hybrid range, and then when I got here, I had about 20 miles, which is exactly what you want. I do like the little drive mode button down here, and Porsche's sport response option is also one of my favourite things on any car. If you're not familiar with it, essentially whatever driving mode you're in, if you press this little button down here, it will just turn everything into absolute full attack for about 20 seconds. So if you're just bimbling along and you suddenly want to get past something, press that button and the car will be ready to go. It's essentially a sort of push to pass almost. I like that. It's a good idea. The heads-up display is quite decent, and unlike the recent BMW that I drove, it seems to get most speed signs fairly correct. Certainly hasn't told me that it's 80 mile an hour in a village yet, which is what the M340i did on 2 separate occasions. This car's also got adaptive cruise control, not standard, very nice LED lights which twist and turn and all sorts of things, not standard. And if you are going to put people in the back regularly, this is a better car than either of the Ferraris, because you've got rear doors and a lot more space for passengers, and the boot's a very good size too. Overall then, it is a very good package. It's got space in it, feels luxurious enough, certainly very fast, it's got a good badge, and if you spec it right, it has plenty of toys as well. Should you buy one? Well, that's complicated. Because if I had this amount of money and I wanted a 4-seater, 4-door, let's just call it supercar, even though they're not supercars, would I buy one? No. If you're willing to go second-hand and you're really into the art of driving, I would say get the Ferrari FF. However, you've got to realise it's an older car, it's going to come with older car problems, and also a thirst that would make Oliver Reed look like a right amateur. However, if you do put people in the back on a regular basis, cars like that can be quite a faff. So if you want a 4-door, you know what my choice would be? I'd get a Taycan. Yes, the interior in many ways frustrates me perhaps even more than this, but it does feel like they've really tried. It does feel like a car from the future. It also has a turn of pace which is, quite frankly, alien. Maybe you'd get used to it over time, but I think that's a car where genuinely the electric bit, you know what, if you don't like electric, fine, get one of these. But if you don't mind the idea of electric, and I don't, I think the Taycan's a better thing. A little bit more cramped perhaps than this, but you feel a little bit lower down. It feels more sports car than this does. And the sheer pace of that thing, oh my word. It's also very comfortable, also has lots of toys in it, and the Taycan I drove was 20 grand less than this, and it did not in any way, shape or form feel like a lesser car. Bet you didn't see that one coming, because I didn't. This then really to me is the car you probably should buy in place of the Cayenne Turbo SE Hybrid. Similarly priced, if anything this is actually more money than that, and why, I don't know. I'm struggling to see where the extra is, but it's a better drive, it has all the things you'd like in that car, and it's just as practical, so you're not really losing anything. So there we have it. That's a brief look at the Porsche Panamera Turbo S E-Hybrid Sport Turismo. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.